This session features our general humanities sector, and it will be presented by Jack Schabert. Jack Schabert is a Twin Cities-based musician, composer, and educator. He performs professionally around the metro with various jazz groups and is an instructor of percussion, piano, drum set, and jazz studies at various music schools in the area. He holds a Bachelor of Music degree from St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. Jack leads professional jazz ensembles, and today you will get a sneak peek of his excellent space module series with us. Welcome to the Music of Middle-earth. But before I turn it over to you, Jack, great to see you here. I'll just pose this fun question to everyone. Which composer do you feel has most successfully portrayed Tolkien's stories with music? We'll post that in the chat too if you want to give some chatter for Jack later on in the session. So great to have you here, Jack. And over to you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Is my audio coming through all right?
It's going through great. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. So, as you heard, my name is Jack Schabert. I'm from Minnesota. I'm a musician and composer. And here at Signum, I've had the pleasure of over the last school year, we've been doing our Music of Middle Earth series in space. We have explored. We first did a month-long course on a few collection of Tolkien-inspired musics, and then right now we're in the middle of a three-part series on Howard Shore's scores for Lord of the Rings films. But today I'm gonna kind of give you an overview into the sort of the area of study that I seem to have found myself in, and then we'll get to do a bit of the process. We'll take a look at a bit of Howard Shore's Two Towers score and dig into that, which will be fun. So, for a lot of us, growing up, and our first experiences reading Tolkien was opening the first pages of The Hobbit and reading through The Unexpected Party and getting to that. It's almost like a musical, The Hobbit, kind of. It's a children's book, and there's times when it seems like all the characters start singing all of a sudden, and it's just kind of delightful in that way. And our first experience with music in Tolkien comes from that. I'll read you a bit of it. This is from An Unexpected Party. "Now for some music," said Thorin. "Bring out the instruments." Keely and Feely rushed for their bags and brought back little fiddles. Dory, Nori, and Ori brought out flutes from somewhere inside their coats. Bomber produced a drum from the hall. Biffer and Boffer went out too, and came back with clarinets that they had left among the walking sticks. Dwalin and Balin said, "Excuse me, I left mine in the porch." "Just bring mine in with you," said Thorin. They came back with vials as big as themselves, and with Thorin's harp wrapped in a green cloth. It was a beautiful golden harp, and when Thorin struck it, the music began all at once. So sudden and sweet that Bilbo forgot everything else, and was swept away into dark lands under strange moons, far over the water, and very far from his hobbit hole under the hill. And The Hobbit kind of takes us, we have a lot of similar experiences where music seems to take our characters into a new world. And that's an experience Tolkien kind of has himself, as we'll see in just a sec from one of his letters. Another really beautiful moments of Tolkien's characters being affected by music is, of course, Frodo in the Hall of Fire, when Bilbo is chanting his Eärendil poem. And the lead up to that is just beautiful. It reads, "At first, the beauty of the melodies and of the interwoven words in elven tongues, even though he understood them little, held him in a spell, as soon as he began to attend to them. Almost it seemed that the words took shape, and visions of far lands and bright things that he had never yet imagined opened out before him, and the firelit hall became like a golden mist above seas of foam that sighed upon the margins of the world." And as a musician and as a music enjoyer, it sounds very poetic, but it's so real. And I hope if you have not, I hope you get to have this experience soon of listening to music that is just so overwhelmingly, it takes you in. And this is an experience I hope all of you get to have. For me, it only happens live with the live in live music. Hearing music out of a box is sort of, you can almost get there, but not quite the same thing. And of course, the largest example of Tolkien's the injection of this musical sphere into Tolkien's work is when we strike the bottom of the well, the very creation of the universe in Tolkien's mythology is a musical invention. So reading through this stuff, it's all, I always knew Tolkien and music was somehow, you can't really study this stuff just by looking at it, but somehow I felt that there was always, there must be music out there. There must be just lots of it. I knew, of course, about the Howard Shore's scores and the usual things we think of, but there's a lot more once I read this letter, I couldn't help myself. I had to dig in. This is letter 260. This is from a letter to Carrie Blyton, sorry, in 1964. Blyton had asked Tolkien's permission to compose a Hobbit overture. And Tolkien writes back, "You certainly have my permission to compose any work that you wished based on The Hobbit. As an author, I am honored to hear that I have inspired a composer. I have long hoped to do so, and hoped also that I might find the result intelligible to me, or feel that it was akin to my own inspiration. I have little musical knowledge. Though I come of a musical family, owing to defects of education and opportunity as an orphan, such music as was in me was submerged, until I married a musician, or transformed into linguistic terms. Music gives me great pleasure and sometimes inspiration. But I remain in the position in reverse of one who likes to read or hear poetry, but knows little of its technique or tradition or of linguistic structure." So here we have Tolkien's very first offer to write music based on his stories, and you can tell he's very excited. And just look at him now. Look at all the music we have based on Tolkien's stories. And I'm constantly hearing about more of it. Jean says, "I'm very biased, but two underrated composers who have worked in Middle-earth, Chance Thomas and now Bill Champagne, the two primary composers who have made the MMO, The Lord of the Rings Online soundscape, come to life." See, there's another whole musical world I have yet to dig into that I'm going to write down right now. But there's always more and more and more composers all over the world being inspired by Tolkien's stories. And they come in the form of musical hobbyists who are huge Tolkien fans and they kind of do music for fun, and they end up making these great arrangements and making them public. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have some of the best composers in the world who either read Tolkien growing up and then were inspired to write music about it, or didn't read Tolkien until they were hired to write music about it, and then fell in love with it and made fantastic art, trying to tell Tolkien stories through sound or paint a picture of his world with an orchestra. There's a whole world of Tolkien-inspired music, and so what I've done is I've split the world of Tolkien-inspired music into three categories, and each of these three categories has its own challenges and helps us better understand if we're looking at them from the right perspective. We can seek to understand how these stories attempt to tell Tolkien stories, or if they're not trying to tell a story, sometimes they're just painting a picture or a landscape. Sometimes they're vaguely inspired, and it's just a title and a musical adventure we go on. Excuse me. But the first category I have is just standalone music. This is a composer closes the last page of Lord of the Rings. It says, "Holy cow, that was awesome. That has to be a symphony," and writes a symphony. That's, for example, Johann de Meijs. He has two symphonies about Tolkien stories. It's music written to be performed for an audience sitting there and enjoying the music. And a lot of times with standalone music, all you have to go on is the title. And for someone showing up to hear Symphony Number 1, Lord of the Rings, who just shows up, you have the playbill, and it gives you the names of the movements, but you're just sitting there listening to a symphony that is called The Lord of the Rings, and the um, the adventure that can take you on. You really have to. It's a really different mode of storytelling than a lot of people are used to, but it's really beautiful. Um, Giving you a title of a piece, and then you just get the piece. Um, my second category is poetry setting. This is a composer reads a poem and decides to set it to music. This is a very literal. Okay, here's Tolkien's poem. I take the lyrics and I put them to a song, to a melody, or they're chanted, or, and that's a very, it's a very, it has its own challenges, that area of musical adaptation, and is another fascinating area to dig into. And my last category is music for adaptation. So that's film scores, video game scores, music for audiobooks, any other adaptation form you can think of. This is in this genre of composition deals with the source material, deals with the original story. It also deals with the adaptation itself and what that adaptation is doing with the source material. And in Howard Shore's case, as we'll check out in just a sec, it deals with poetry as well. And we'll sort of get within a musical adaptation setting. We get two settings of poetry. One of them Tolkien's. In the segment we'll listen to. Gene says, poem to song, John G. Bartolo's The Lonely Mountain Band, putting Gimli's Durin poem to music. I think I have heard that one. I will write it down, make sure. Thank you, Gene. Thank you. Yes, if anyone wants to dump Tolkien-inspired music in the chat, do it. I have the students in the Music in Middle-earth program in Space, we have a running spreadsheet of Tolkien-inspired music, and it's still getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Unlike Tolkien's corpus of writings, Tolkien is dead and he's not writing anymore. Unlike that, there's composers all over the world constantly making more and more and more music, and it's not going to slow down. We have 3 seasons of television coming worth of music. We've got 2 movies on the way worth of music. Who knows how much standalone music is currently being written, but it's not slowing down. Yeah, Gene, we have Rings of Power on there. That's on the long list for the Music Milo series, is an exploration of the Rings of Power soundtracks. Someday. But I should stop yapping. We should look at some music. So the scene I've chosen to look at today, it's about 3.5 minutes long. This is the end of the Two Towers. And this is at the, let me make sure I get the right timestamp here. This is at the crux of the Helm's Deep plot. Now, one of my favorite things about our Music of Middle-earth class is that right now we're going through the whole Lord of the Rings films, looking at Howard Shore's scores. And the best thing about this class is having, 8 people in a room together and getting to access, getting unfiltered access to 8 other people's ears, right? My trained musical ear is not nearly as powerful as, a group of people dumping what they're hearing and what they're feeling and what they're thinking into the chat box is really helpful because we can listen to a short segment and unload thoughts as we hear and then talk about it as we go. And it's just, and most of the time within 30 seconds, I'm seeing people hearing things that I had never heard and feeling things that I never had the vocabulary to put into words. Talking about music is very difficult. And, I'm a trained musician and we have lots of vocabulary, much of it in Italian, to talk about music, but sometimes that doesn't do it. Sometimes the logistical and technical descriptors for music aren't enough, and it's really challenging to hear sound and translate it into emotion in English. But that is our task, is trying to figure out how this music works. How does it help us tell the story? How does it help the scene being portrayed? How does it back up the actors? How does it kind of disagree with the actors sometimes, or the characters rather? But the way in which music tells a story is incredibly profound. So I encourage you, as we listen to, we'll do a chunk at a time, but please share your thoughts, share what you hear, share your questions as we go through. I, of course, have lots of things to say about each thing we'll listen to, but it'll be helped by your ears, and we will therefore experience multiple times more sound here. Let me share my audio.
And Jack, sorry for just the gentle interruption. We've got still almost 15 minutes, so that's great.
Yep.
What can men do against such reckless hate?
Is that audio coming through? Thank you very much. So, this is the end of, this is, of course, Theoden and Aragorn in the keep. And we get the build. This entire scene is just a masterclass, I think, in anticipation and pacing. This is all a build-up. Sometimes we get Howard Shore doing this very operatic thing, and he's giving us strings and harmonies underneath a dialogue scene. This is not that. This is, for example, you have multiple times here, a character will say a line, and then a big theme that we recognize will come in. That's Bear McCreary does this a lot. It's just the melody itself is a tool in order to remind us of something, and that happens quite a few times. And the way that Howard Shore will wait until the character delivers the line, and then we get the musical event, is it's a very upfront, in your face way to get a point across musically. Let's listen to the first chunk here.
Ride out with me. Ride out and meet them.
For death and glory.
For Rohan. For your people.
The sun is rising.
So just that much. We have soprano alto alone singing the following text. This is translated into Old English for this bit, fittingly for our Rohirrim. This is Tolkien's poem. Where is the helm and the hauberk and the bright hair flowing? Where is the hand on the harp string and the red fire glowing? Where is the spring and the harvest and the tall corn growing? Who shall gather the smoke of the dead wood burning, or behold the flowing years from the sea returning? And so they've taken that poem, translated it into Old English, and used it as a choral text here. And we get it in another verse here. This time not just soprano alto. Now we add strings and drums.
Look to my coming at first light on the 5th day. At dawn, look to the east.
Yes. Yes. The horn of Helm Hammerhand shall sound in the deep. One last time.
So here on this second sort of verse, we get the drums. If you remember back to the films, I think the first time we had that was Strider at the time, taking Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin out of Bree. We had that that same field drum sort of groove with the Fellowship theme over top of it back then. But it's kind of this sort of travel music. It seems to be. It's used a few times that way. This same tempo, same rhythm, cadence. And now it's being used as a build-up to a military event, which is interesting now that I think about it. It's very soft here. It's been used in a very hopeful sense up until now, and now it is again being used in a much more hopeful sense. And then after that verse ended, we heard the harmonies getting higher and higher and higher and higher. Howard Shore uses ascension, melodic ascension and harmonic ascension quite a bit to build up tension and anticipation. It's very effective. Let's keep going.
Yes! Let this be the hour when we draw swords together. Fell deeds awake. Now for wrath, now for ruin, and the red dawn.
So this melody begins. Dun, 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 dun. The text we use in class, or the text I use as a guide sometimes, is Doug. If you've read Doug Adams' book, it's called The Music of the Lord of the Rings films, and it's kind of written for I don't want to say a non-musician. Well, maybe I should. It's kind of written for someone who knows enough about music to get through it. It's very well packaged, and it's kind of delivered as it's a very good tool for someone who's not a trained musician to go through. And it kind of gives you the plot of the whole score. But the one thing that's really helpful that he does is he tracks the themes through the entire trilogy and gives them names. And sometimes I'm hesitant to use the names he gives. Sometimes I'm hesitant to even give a theme a name because of all the ways in which it's used. But this theme I like. It's a pretty broad name. He calls it the nature theme. And we get it the first time we got it was Gandalf with the moth on Orthanc, and then we got it again when Gandalf was rescued off the tower. We had it with the Ents at the March of the Ents, and now we get it in a big way building up here, which seemingly doesn't make much sense, but Howard decided he wanted to highlight nature here at the rising of the sun, and that the eucatastrophe is being delivered by the natural world is a very beautiful idea, and he gives it just by putting that theme back that we've had a few times with trees and birds, and now with the rising of the sun. And here we get, I wouldn't go so far as to call it diegetic music, diegetic being when the story on screen, there's music happening on screen and as part of the score all of a sudden. Well, maybe I would call it that. This is the entrance that you heard, the music just boom, cut off. It reached a climax and it cut out. There's no decay. It's just boom, done. And then we get the horn. And it's the way he sets up the horn musically is so satisfying. Maddie says it still sends chills, and it would. This is super effective writing. Here's the horn and the aftermath of it. So big horn and the horses come in, crash into the bad guys. 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yeah.
Thank you, Rob. We get a crash, and this fanfare that we get as they come out is not exactly proud yet. It's kind of dun 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 dun. It's kind of, I don't know what mood to put that. Maybe you guys can help me. What mood that bit of music was. But it wasn't, we're winning, I don't think. There was kind of a question mark on top of it. What is going to happen? This is a bit chaotic. But as we come out onto the causeway here, cautious optimism. I like that. and maybe focus to huh, like that. But we're trying against all odds. Yeah, I do like that. Yeah, there's a bit of a question mark, but this as they come out into the sunrise on the causeway, there's no more question mark, and we get what the Rohan theme has been building up to for the whole movie right here. And there we reach a climax. He takes the theme he's been using in fragments and in full the whole movie. We had it in solo violin the first few times, and it was really lonely and sad. Now it's in the brass section, and it's huge, and there's crashing percussion behind it and war, and it's just glorious. And it all builds up to this choral sound that is huge. Just two chords, and the shot there, you can't see the film, but the shot there is the camera up looking up the hill from below at Gandalf coming out with the sun behind him, and we just get two massive chords from the choir. It's just so it's like deliverance has arrived when a choir comes in. A choir has that effect, and we get a peak, and then we're back down here just for a sec now as we get the fellowship theme showing us we can't climax and stay there. You got to hit the climax, come back down, and then do it again, and that's what he does here.
Theoden King stands alone. Not alone. Rohirrim!
We got about half a minute of music and about 2 minutes. So here we get this is the end of the battle. They're going to sweep down and take over, and you might be tempted as the composer to do something like Howard Shore has done many times before, as do battle music and stuff like that, but this is just sheer beauty, and we enter a place where the choir is on top of the orchestra and there's reverb, and it's just huge. This is the music of deliverance and eucatastrophe. What Doug Adams calls his Gandalf the White theme. And then we go back to the Ents, and it's dark again, but I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you, Rob, for having me.
Thank you, Jack. Yes, and we have some things to look forward to as we also are looking to expand. Jack has a lot of ideas for this fall about expanding the Music of Middle-earth program, so we're very excited. That's something to take note of on the launch pad of BlackBerry. These are new course concepts that we're looking for feedback on when that comes together. So Jack, thank you so much for the capsule today, and I'll just post here in the session post. You can see the links for how to get involved. So the Return of the King score is being celebrated in the June module with Jack Schabert, and so that is available for enrollment, and check that out for June. If you add the course to your wish list, we will keep in touch with you about it as well. So we'd love to have you be a part of the class.